And when I look to that, it's like, okay, I could see why there's not a lot of black male educators. If we think about the legacy of oppression in school systems, especially against black and brown bodies, then it's easy for us to come to a conclusion that that maybe black and brown males don't want to be in that system that has harmed them over that duration of time. I think that it's like part of being a black male is understanding that you're not going to see yourself in a lot of those educational spaces to begin with. So it wasn't that I was numb to it. It wasn't that I wasn't aware of it. It was just that I was kind of like used to that. So I guess that's the best way I could answer that question. I guess I was used to that. I feel if it affected me more in terms of like race dynamic, where like I was highly noticing, oh, I'm actually the only black male sitting in my master's level course right now. You know, that's where it kind of like hit me more, but not in a way to like devastate me, but like, yeah, this is the situation. That's kind of ironic. I keep going back to legacy. So if we're thinking about institutions that originally were set up for one type of person, and to begin with, the white male, right? And we think about what those institutions were formed to do for the people that were like engaged in the learning, and how groups were oppressed and left out of that equation. And then not only were they oppressed and left out of the equation, when they were included in the equation, then they became the group that was most likely to be removed from the classroom or put into an ISS or expelled, these punitive practices that were directly applicable to black and brown bodies. When we think about that, and then we think about the fact that you're letting me know that the percentages of black male educators being involved in that disciplinary component, I think that could be, that's super ironic that now you're overseeing that discipline, when you are representative of those who were like mostly disciplined to begin with. So I see an irony in that. My hope for it is that, and it doesn't mean, because you happen to be a black male educator, doesn't mean that you are just gonna rock it in the classroom and connect with all your black male educators and not make mistakes and also oppress. I've seen plenty of black and brown bodies also be oppressive that have been tied in and wrapped into a system that has harmed them, and they carry on those traditions without breaking out of it. So my hope would be is that if we have black males in those deemed disciplined positions, that they are, you know, being influential in restorative practices, and not in like the cute sense of the term restorative, like how we like to throw the word around, but like we're actually becoming human to those students that are so-called getting disciplined, and then we are actually lifting them up and building capacity so that they can grow from the mistakes that they made, as all humans should be able to do without being oppressed.
TRC?
Yeah, when you're scared of, when you have lack of knowledge about a culture, and a cultural dynamic, we talk about cultural relevant pedagogy. When you have a lack of knowledge of a culture, it's easy for fear to settle in when that culture is celebrated and awoken in ways that is most applicable to us, whether it's through movement, whether it's through hip hop, whether it's through like a certain poem that you're showing. And those aren't the natural ways that the traditional education has come to meet like a set standard that the state sets. Because state standards drive curriculum. The state testing drives curriculum. And so there's a big overwhelming issue systematically. And then when combined with that, you have race, right? You have institutionalized racism, you have overt racism, you have people that still aren't ready to even talk about privilege and the impact of that mindset or lack of growth mindset and how it applies to uplifting students for real. So when you talk to me about, when you mention situations where teachers might not feel welcome culturally in their pedagogical approach, and you limit that and you put constraints on it, and it's constrained by what it is that the state is telling you that you need to do in order to score a certain percentage so that they could classify you to be at a certain level and then put you on a track to perpetuate the system, when you keep limiting that and limiting educators to reach their full capacity and to deliver truly culturally relevant pedagogy, then yes, I feel like that could impact teachers. Because not only have you come up through a system that has a legacy of oppressing you, whether it was conscious or subconscious, you then are being oppressed as the educator. And the way that the system is set up, you come in as a new black educator, you are the minority in the space, right? So you already have that weight. Plus you have the weight of state standards, the curriculum. You have the weight of oppressive legacy. You have the weight of being new and just not knowing what the heck am I going to do with my class the next day, and a lack of support, and self-care is a big part of that. We don't talk about that. So I'm a big believer in reimagining what the educational space looks like in the first place. And I think that every time I step inside the classroom, it's a Civil Rights Act. I think they reference it very much to like there was a school that was at the top of the hill. You had your black schools at the bottom of the hill. And the black schools was doing what they were doing with their community, their culture, with what it is that they had. They had a lack of resources. Lack of resources was a catalyst to be like, yo, this is unequal. What is it, like equal, separate, but equal? But it wasn't. It wasn't. And so then they're like, all right, well, then we'll go ahead and we'll have some of the people that are at the bottom of the street start coming into our schools. So then they reform that, right? Brown versus Board of Education, there's resources and stuff, but no one here is up on that culturally relevant pedagogy. And when I say that like if I'm teaching in Lyman, Connecticut on a farm and where kids are like out riding four-wheelers, me as a black male educator is going to become accustomed to that culture so that I could be effective in my instruction in my classroom for that particular culture, right? Not closing my mind to the other cultures, but considering what it is I need to do in that space. Keeping in mind, keeping your mind aligned with the fact that there's dopeness in being an educator. For me, I would never give it up because I get to step in the room every day and influence that change. I have this line that's like, every time I step inside my classroom, it's a Civil Rights Act. Fight oppression by teaching lessons to students that give them wisdom to fight back. The youth be the true hope. Forget the future. They the leaders of now. And I suggest adults take notes. We sick and tired of these institutions bleeding us out, especially if you trans, gay, black, or you brown, especially if you a female holding it down, or if you mentally ill, deaf, blind, or if you wheelchair bound. Now don't you try to beam me up, Scotty. I got a purpose to serve, lyrical church. You can worship the words, and I don't claim to be a god or nothing. I just aim to be the man that my father wasn't. So teaching is dope. And if we can expose students to that side of it, while at the same time working hard to shift the paradigm to affect those changes that need to be made, I think a combination of those two, we can invite more black male educators into the space. I also think standards, the means by which you have to become certified to become a teacher, I think that can be revamped and looked at again. And then there's systematic stuff, because you look at the numbers of black male students even graduating and then getting into college. What are we doing at the higher ed universities too to truly prep? How are we forming alliances with others who have pedagogical abilities but might not be have the classic certification, but have those skills to deliver, to tell anecdotal stories, to engage, to organize. How do we combine all those things together? And I think that once you do that and you're working on shifting the paradigm and at the same time embracing what it is that is happening, that's dope. I think that if you do all those things in combination, then we can work towards getting more black males into the beautiful art of education. Yo, that's a huge one. So I was chilling with my homegirl Renice. Shout out to Renice Washington. So she's a restorative practitioner over at the high school, and she's super powerful black female educator. And she's all about the babies. Let's uplift the babies. Whatever we got to do, let's uplift them. Let's make sure at the same time while we're giving them the content and we're meeting the standards that we're also truly giving them the social justice care that they need. So we had a little debate. We were at it was a CT Core meeting. So CT Core is I have their quote above my they demand reparations. Like they like in their write up, like they are about it for Black and brown bodies in the educational system. So I was at this like little it was like a workshop that they were running. It was dope. And we were in the car. It was before we were going in. She was eating a bagel and she was like, I don't know about this whole thing with like having Black males shadow our Black male teachers. She was like, I'm afraid that we could possibly be setting them up for poor finances. She was like, I'm struggling financially. So as an educator, I do not get paid for the work that I actually do. And I could see why I might want to motivate some of my Black male educators. I could see why I might want to motivate them to get involved in business, independent self-employment, a trade, things that could really contribute to their financial support. So that needs to be taken into consideration. Yo, mama leave. Mothers, this is Dr. B Love. Mothers in the educational field that have their babies and then come back, that's a whole nother dynamic. Black mothers, especially, it's just different. It just is. The race dynamic is different. And what that does to you emotionally, and then to come back into the space where harm still continues, and then to also at that same time be away from your baby, like why don't we have why don't I have a daycare here? Why don't we have a daycare in this space and I have students engaging with the young ones, designing lessons, like passing, we need to rethink the system.